Hey everyone.
Wait, is it live?
I don't think so. It says it's still waiting.
Yeah, hold on. Is it? We're live. Hey, we are live. Wait, I'm so
Hey.
loud.
Hi
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
I see it now too.
everyone.
okay.
Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan, and welcome to the Young AAJA resume, cover letter, and interview webinar. So, for those of you joining us tonight, make sure to tweet us your questions at these handles here. In case throughout the night you have questions about things we say, you can tweet them at us and we will answer them at the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So first off, just to introduce myself. My name is Alan. I'm starting as a digital content associate producer at CBS Radio in about 2 weeks. And I come from a digital and radio background. I graduated from NYU in May of 2017. And I pivoted to radio after I graduated. And now here I am. Lian, would you want to go next?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Lian Parsons. I graduated Temple University in December of last year, and I have a background in print and online journalism. So I'm primarily a writer. I've covered pretty much everything from technology, finance, education. I'm currently working as a freelancer and seeking a full-time job. So hopefully this interview portion will be especially relevant for me. So Elaine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi guys, my name's Elaine. I graduated spring of 2016, and I graduated from Cal State Fullerton in California, and I'm in Beaumont, Texas currently. I'm in broadcast journalism. So I do on-air reports as well as packages. Here in Beaumont, we were hit. We were actually the last cities that were hit during Tropical Storm or Hurricane Harvey, as everybody else knows it. We had 56 inches of rain here. I was live during all of that as well. So it was a very, very big opportunity. And it was just a crazy, crazy storm for all of us to cover. So I've been doing that for almost 2 years here. And I'm actually about to move to another station. But yeah, so that's me.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So then now, just for those who are joining us now, a reminder is that if you want to have any questions throughout the time, maybe take a screenshot or whatever you need to do of these Twitter handles and make sure you tweet at us during the event. So thank you. So next, our first section will be on resumes and also on broadcast reels. So first off, how we did this was we solicited cover letters and resumes from you guys. So we picked out a few resumes that we want to go over and it's kind of just talk about what we think makes a good resume. So for our first resume, we will be looking at Ashley's resume. She is currently a entertainment like freelance writer, and she's worked at the Hollywood Reporter. So just wait for the document to pull up. And yeah, so thank you. There we go. Okay. So right now, as we can see here, basically we'll kind of take turns. I'm kind of like providing feedback, and then just like saying what we like about it and what maybe personally we would change about it. So Lian, did you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So as we can see, this design is split into two columns, which is pretty common when you're organizing your resumes. You either have a one column or two columns. This one is all the sections are clearly delineated by either bold font in the red color or with slightly larger font. So you can really pick out the section you're looking for as quickly as possible. All of the bullet points are relatively short. There's action verbs. Action verbs, as in not using passive tense. So just say edit, produce, report, cover. It's getting right to the point of what exactly it was that she did. And also at the top, there's a little section about her. So that says entertainment editor and reporter specializing in profiles, features, trend stories, and event coverage suitable for print, web, and social platforms so that potential employers can really know what they're targeting. What else do you think you noticed, Alan?
Yeah, so first off, I'm just like building off of what Leanne said. This resume, it's really clean, and you can tell by the way that they use the space. you can tell how most of the lines in the resume, right, the subpoints are each one line. And I really want to hammer home that point about action verbs, because the thing is that if you just covered up like half the resume and you just went down each bullet point and read the first word or the first like 2-3 words, right? Because when someone's scanning a resume, whether or not they're using resume bot, which is a whole different topic as a person, right? If you're just scanning a resume, usually, you'll like go down the line, right? But then like if you just look at the first few words and you can already tell what they've done, then you're in a good place, right? Because that's why if you're someone who's going through tens or hundreds of resumes, right, you want to make sure that you can get through these quickly and have a quick idea of who this person is, right? Because a resume is about telling, and then the cover letter is about showing, which we'll talk about later, right? But the resume, in a sense, is just how I like to describe it, is like breadcrumbs, where you're dropping all these little clues for your reader, right, to get an idea quickly of who you are, and hooking their attention enough that they would want to read your cover letter or want to know more about you, or maybe even interview you, right? And for me, I've been advised to put my education at the bottom, because as someone who's will be working, right? If you've been working for a while, as Ashley has, your education almost doesn't matter in a sense. So that's why personally, I would put education at the bottom. I really like how she has this section for bylines, right? It's really important, whether on Twitter, your bio account, or your tagging accounts, or even just like here. It's really a good idea to have, if you're in print, right, to have a summary of where you've worked, and also it gives a bit, in a way, it implies what beats you've covered as well. And then I really like the skill section. It's a really easy place just to hammer out what technically, right? You want to keep the skills technical, because there are a lot of like things like I used to have on LinkedIn. I have not nice, but I have these like very subjective, like listening, or you know what I mean? Like it's kind of very like generic things that are very subjective, and like you want to have skills on here that are hard skills that are easily like tangible and definable. And contact information is also really good. But one thing that personally that I like to have on my resume is having a personal interest section. This is a personal thing, but it's that I think it just adds a little bit to your resume, because in a sense, when you're applying for a job, any at any point on your resume and your cover letter, what you have full control over, if there's any chance you can use to make an impression or have someone stick out in someone's mind, right? Whether it's having a good design or just in that sort of sense too, I feel like it would help, and I don't think it would hurt you at all, in a sense where it helps to let your reader know that you're like a human being, you have other interests, and that you're not just like working all the time, that sort of sense, or just like it kind of adds a little color, I think, to your resume. For example, on my resume, I have brightly colored pants. I like looking for music and sharing music with my friends. Just little things like that. But in order overall, that's all I had. And yeah.
If I could just add on real quick to what Alan was saying, so number one, the note about education. If you are a recent graduate, it is relevant to put it sort of toward the top of your resume. So you, especially if you're applying for entry-level jobs, or especially if you're applying to a job that is in the same city or town where you graduated from. So an employer potentially would be more likely to take on someone who is sort of, homegrown, so to speak. Also with the interests, I do think that can definitely help add, color to your professional profile. But I would also add that perhaps only if you have space. I feel like a lot of us struggle with trying to fit everything on one page. Resumes, just a quick note, resumes always have to be one page. They're not going to read more than one page. And which is why, like we said, it's good to have the additional, like Ashley did, the additional bylines or additional information. So putting things that are the most relevant to the job you're applying for, whether it's marketing, if you've had marketing experience, don't put in the experience about, working at a restaurant, for example, because the skills aren't going to transfer.
Yeah, just building off that point, it's like this that I think a lot of times people fall into this trap where they feel like they need to include every single experience they've ever had, and in that sort of sense, right, it gets kind of redundant where a lot of the experiences, right, they don't really add anything to the resume because they're all saying very similar things, right? For example, if you've worked at multiple papers and magazines, sometimes a lot of times you're doing the same things at each one. So in that sort of sense, you're not really adding, or like each point isn't deliberate in the fact that you're just people are just putting it there because they need something there instead of like thinking about, wow, so what each point should have a purpose. So I think that's something to keep in mind moving forward. And I think we can move on to the next resume, which is Thomas. And just here we go. And yes, we did but let's underscore in the previous one too, we did block out their contact info for privacy reasons. But I guess I can start with this one since you started the last one. But for this one, I liked just he's kind of a hybrid where he has the single column right on top, and then he has like the like the dual column on the bottom. And for me, I like the font. I like just it looks fairly clean. Just that for me personally, I like picking one, like either having one column or just like two column. But like here, I think it works okay. I like the top part where he has like a profile, where he has like it's like a brief summary. He has his education, right? We were talking about he's still a student, so it helps to have that education on top. Because like for applying for internships, they want students usually, and not people who've been in the industry for a long time. And then I did like how he, in a sense, formatted his title, right? He has like the name of the organization, where it was, and how long he's been there, right? And then he kind of breaks it down to where he has that bold to less bold, right? And then he has produce, shoot, edit weekly content, leading, created, and also just like I also liked he has those awards, right? Because as a student, and also just speaking back to what Lian said earlier, you want to maximize your efficiency in terms of how you use your space, right, on the resume. So having these awards, I think, right, the broadcast grant, the scholarship, I think these are all good things to have. And all co-curriculars, right, having the AAJA, and then having like the APDO, definitely like at first glance, it doesn't seem like it's related to journalism, but the thing is that I think it's really important also not just to be in journalism per se, where we have other interests and we have other things that we're involved in that could contribute to our knowledge and to perspectives that we can have in the newsroom, right? So that's why I think that's like a really good thing to have on there too. And it's really special that a lot of people usually wouldn't have. And then they also have the skills on the bottom. Personally, I think for skills, it would just be better to have it in commas because really, you're not talking about. I guess some people they like to have those little bars where they like super proficient in this or kind of proficient in that. But for me, I just put the skills down straight up, really easy just to scan and as a list. And Leanne, do you have anything to add?
Sure. A lot of people, when they submitted their questions through a poll, thank you very much. That was really helpful. They were asking about what to do if you don't have a lot of prior journalism experience. And sort of like what like Alan was talking about, it doesn't necessarily have to be strictly journalism. There's a lot of jobs or a lot of experiences or clubs that you are that you've participated in that do have transferable skills. So whether you have worked in a collaborative setting or whether you have been, so I'm just going to use an example here. So if you worked at a restaurant, for example, as a waiter, then you could say that you're good with thinking fast on your feet, with being very organized, following directions clearly. There's other things that are just innate qualities about you. So are you a fast learner? Are you flexible? Those are things that can be really easily taught, especially if you're going into an internship where you will have a supervisor to guide you. So it's more about, and we'll get more to this later in terms of cover letters and interviews, but it's kind of about almost like spinning yourself in a way to make you seem like the best fit for that job. And then also a quick note just about formatting and things like that. If you are in print journalism, it does definitely help to have your resume in AP style. AP style is just is one of those things that you just gotta know. And if you're not sure about something, there's AP style book online. You can get it in print. I have it, thank you very much, on my bookshelf. So just to show employers that you do know your stuff just from the get-go.
Yeah, I really like that point. Thank you, Lian. And I also wanted to add that one thing that Ashley did a little bit that I think that could be added to this one as well is adding in metrics, right? So whether it's the number, I guess like later on, I guess it's less relevant, but early on in your career sometimes too, it helps to have like metrics, for example, like the number of stories you wrote or the number of people, right, who read your story, or like, for example, if you work in radio or something like that, like how many people listen to your stories and that sort of thing, where it kind of gives your experience a little more oomph, I guess, in a sense. It's not, I don't think it's super important, but I think it could definitely help. And Leanne, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, that's all good.
All right, so we go ahead. So next we have Elaine, who will be talking about broadcast reels. So broadcast people, listen up. Thank you.
Okay, guys. So obviously, print and broadcast, all journalism, but it's very different with how you submit everything. So of course, you still have to have your resume and your cover letters, but the formatting of it all. Of course, Lian and Alan, like, they absolutely know what they're talking about. But for broadcast, when you submit it for, if you're applying for Sinclair, if you're applying for an NBC station, an ABC station, any of the stations, a Nexstar station, they're all basically going to have you copy and paste your resume, and they're going to make you put it in a box. And then you just submit it. Alan is like cringing right now. He's like, how dare they? But they basically, you put it in a box, and then that's how you submit it. So it'll show up like, just like on a box for the person that's looking at it to read over. So it doesn't matter like how it looks, as long as it's everything's spelled correctly, and you have the experience necessary. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that that's the same thing for the cover letters as well. So it doesn't have to be super pretty for that either. And then we were sent a few reels, but we are not going to use them just because I can only speak upon on-air reels for reporters. I can't speak on, wanting to be an anchor. I can't speak on producer reels or any production reels because I don't have experience in that, and I don't think it'd be fair if I were to speak on that. But we did get some of those reels, so I'll send those off to other folks that are in this industry that I know that would be able to critique it to help those that have sent it to us. So we're going to actually just use my reel. I made this reel probably, I think maybe January, maybe December, January, that just happened. So it's pretty recent. Again, I was a part of Harvey coverage here in Beaumont. We're about an hour away from Houston. So we were hit really hard from the storm. So that's where all of this kind of happens and takes place at, to kind of give you a little perspective of where I'm at. So if we are able to look up the reel, just like we did with the resumes, that would be perfect. I think there might be a little bit of a lag, but I think we can get up. Yep, there it is.
Hey.
Oh, God. I think we have to have the volume on for this one. Okay, so I don't think we're able to kind of get it on right now, but if you guys want to look it up, we're gonna put the reel on there for you guys to look at when you guys get a chance. You guys can either like do it now or you guys can do it afterwards. But basically what it is, hopefully everybody can hear me, but so basically what it is a montage of things, but kind of what you're seeing me in my tennis shoes. I always wear my white tennis shoes to work, and people always laugh at me, but they're always so comfortable, and they're usually only here up from what you can see. So I always wear comfortable shoes. So basically what it is a montage, minute 30 of basically stand-ups and live shots of your work. So it could be anything from you doing a stand-up where you're holding, a prop, like you're holding like a water bottle and you're talking about recycling. And you're saying, 10,000 people, say they don't recycle a year, and then you do another shot of it, and then it's, the water bottle getting thrown in the trash can, and then it goes back to you talking about something else about recycling. So it's stand-ups like that, and then also live shots, which is the person standing in front of the camera with a cameraman, or you being an MMJ, which I am, and you get behind the camera and you kind of zoom in and zoom out of showing the scene or showing what you want to show during a live shot. And that's about like a minute 30 is what you want. So for me in my reel, I think I only had maybe 7 or 8 live shots in there. I go live often, so I used majority just live shots in my reel because I do have experience. But for some people that are in school still and you don't have a chance to go live, if your school doesn't have that option in your classes, definitely do really creative stand-ups. You want something to be like a 3-part stand-up where, you're holding something and then you cut to a different shot and then you cut to a different shot again, because that's going to show that you're creative and you can think on your feet. And that's what news directors are really looking for, especially if you're going to be at a beginner market. Like in Beaumont, we're market 142, and all of the people that we've hired for reporter / MMJ roles, they've all had to do creative live shots and stand-ups for their first reel. And then the other thing I wanted to mention to the women out there that are watching, so usually people can put a picture of themselves before their reel starts when you're editing it, kind of putting your face and then putting your information on there, like your email, your phone number, your Twitter handle, basically ways that you can contact, that said reporter. For me, I do not do that, and I've been advised from other mentors not to do that because just being a female on television, there's just so many people that can contact you. Like my first reel right out of college, when I posted it, I would get weird people contacting me, and I was like, how are these people getting my number? And I didn't realize till one of my mentors told me it's because it's on YouTube and everybody can see it. So for me, I don't put the photo on there just because, they're looking at like your whole reel is basically of your face, like a minute 30 of it is basically like you promoting how you look and how you talk. So for me, I just don't really think it's necessary. A lot of people do it and it's fine. You can, but if you're not going to put your number and all that in there, I don't really think it's necessary. And then the next thing I want to talk about is, so after you do the little montage or minute 30, you go to 3 packages. So usually if you're trying to apply for a regular assignment, MMJ or reporter position at any market, you want to have 2 hard news packages. So something where you can cover at your school if, you're at, like in Fullerton, we had Fullerton police, and they would be so willing to talk to us about anything that happened. So we would look at the press releases and we would say, oh, this is interesting. Like there was something happening at, yada, yada school. We can go to that school, talk to the PIO and, get a soundbite that way and then make a story out of whatever it was. But it has to be like a hard news package, something about crime, something about, losing a family member, something that would be a top story, something that would be newsworthy. And, a lot of news directors look for that when they're hiring you straight out of college as well. They expect you to be experienced already because, a lot of them, you take a broadcast journalism class already. So they expect you to have 3 stories on there. And, other people, at my school, they've emailed me now and they show me their reel and they don't have packages on there, which is a story. And I'm just like, if you're applying for jobs, if you don't have any packages on there, they're not going to give you a second look because then they probably think you don't know how to make it. And they're going to have to teach you how to make a package, which is kind of your bread and butter along with your live shots. Like you have to have it. So 2 hard news packages and then a feature package. A feature package is something that you can do. Like this one time I was able to do a story about this dog. He was paralyzed from his halfway down, and these high school students at Silsbee High School, an area where I'm at, they built him a little like doggy wheelchair, and the owner was he's a teacher there. So he like got his class to do that. And it was just like so cute. And you got like the dog walking in it and the students talking about how, great it was. So you want like a feature package, something emotional like that, as your 3rd piece on there. And then, another note, when you are like, for me, when I was at Cal State Fullerton, we did so many like debriefs is what we call them at my station now, but basically like in studios where like the anchor tosses to you saying, you know, and we have Elaine Kong here in the studio and she's going to be talking about, you know, whatever her story is on that day. And if you're like in the studio and you're like, you know, talking and you're reading off a teleprompter, that really doesn't do anything for you because they are going to expect you to be live. So if you don't have any experience of being actually out in the field, just, you know, setting up the camera yourself and recording it, they're probably not going to be as interested in you. I'm not saying that you can't get a job from it if you already have your reel made and, you know, you graduated already, but it's way better if you can just take a day, go and shoot stand-ups, go and, you know, basically prop a camera up there and shoot something that you think would be important, that's something that'd be newsworthy, and then put that on your reel instead. I found that way more productive. And so many of my mentors and people that have helped me get this job have told me the same exact thing. So definitely look into that. And then I think that is all I have for now. Yep, that's all my notes. So back to you guys.
All right, cool. Thank you, Elaine. And for those of you who are just still joining us now, make sure that if you have questions to tweet us here. Elaine's at Elaine Kong News, Lian at Lian_Parsons, and I'm at ALLPNG on Twitter. We have a Q&A session coming up at the very end of this webinar, so stay tuned. And next, I really wanted to just talk a bit about resumes and cover letters. So because this idea that I kind of mentioned earlier, this idea that when you're turning in a resume and a cover letter, they're supposed to work together and they're not supposed to say the same thing. So here we have Lian, who will be talking about her resume and cover letter. So in this way, as she explains her process of creating her cover letter and her resume, she can kind of talk about how they work together. And Lian, take it away.
Yeah. So when you're first writing a cover letter, it's really important to think of the job that you're applying for. So I talked a little bit about this before, but it's kind of about tailoring it to that specific job and what that job needs. So most jobs nowadays will post, you know, the skills needed, like there'll be a section for like what your responsibilities will be or main skills needed, and it will list what they're looking for. So for this one that I wrote for, this was for WGBH, and I was interested in the position of news writer. So I leaned very heavily on my news writing experience. So I talked about how I am able to cover a vast variety of topics and had to learn very quickly because I'd never covered those topics before. Of course, talked about my role as assistant news editor for my school paper because that is the most relevant thing to news writer. And then I also talked a little bit about where I'm from because it's a news writer for Boston, which is my hometown. So those three things in conjunction, you know, strong news background, able to write quickly and cover multiple topics, and then the fact that I know the city relatively well. And I also added, and I'm not familiar with Philly as well because, well, that's where I went to school. It's where Temple University is, but I still was able to go into a different environment and cover it, even though I wasn't as familiar with it. And so as I was writing my cover letter, I had my resume pulled up next to me, and I picked out the individual pieces that I thought were the most relevant. So if we could just switch real quick to the resume. Perfect. You'll see that I have multiple experiences on there, and obviously you can't fit everything into a cover letter because that would be ridiculous. So I just found the ones that were most relevant to the position of news writer and went into it with that. Also, Alan's going to talk a little bit about this because he has reviewed a lot of cover letters and resumes in his time. But also I kept my anecdotes relatively short. So if you'll see on my work experience, we were talking a little bit about keeping your bullet points short. It's kind of like that with cover letters as well. You can sort of do a little bit of an exposition and say how maybe you learned these skills or what has served you well in your past work experience. But if you go on sort of a long tangent about, for example, I worked at City AM in London, and London was cool. And, I wasn't really sure what I was doing because I didn't know much about business, but I figured it out. They're going to lose interest. And at the end of the day, when they're reading your so first they read your resume, and then if they're interested, if they think that your skills are what they're looking for, then they'll read your cover letter. Sometimes they won't get to your cover letter. That's okay. Don't take it personally. But when they're reading your cover letter, they're looking for how your skills on your resume have built up and how you can show what you've learned. And so yeah, Ellen, if you want to talk a little bit about the anecdotes part, because I know you feel pretty passionately about that.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, yes. So, I guess we can move on to the next cover letter because this is what I want to talk. I guess what we're going to talk about next. Megan's cover letter. So first off, before we begin this feedback a little bit, I really want to say thank you to Megan, all those who are willing to submit the cover letters. And right now, what we'll be doing is we'll kind of be going through things about what we think could be improved. And again, right, it's constructive criticism. We're all just trying to help each other out. So here we go. So things that I think one thing that Lian mentioned earlier, right? So this idea of having an anecdote in the beginning. And one thing I found is that a lot of people like to use anecdotes to introduce their cover letters. They like to have a nice story where they have a good background. And here, right, it's midnight on Thursday, June 2017, right? And then they have like this kind of like almost like setting a scene, right? And like there's nothing wrong with that. But again, right, if you actually could we scroll down on the cover letter just a tiny bit so we can start on the dear part. So if you look at it, right, this cover letter, at least it looks like at about half, or is that a third, or maybe 3/4 of the cover letter is just that one story, right? And I think when you're writing a cover letter, you have to think about it almost how I think about it, almost like reading a resume, where you really are thinking about how your reader is thinking when they're reading this resume. Because I'm just going back to the other point, right? How your resume and your cover letter are supposed to be working in tandem, right? They're complements. So your cover letter is quick and fast, where they have 2 points, and then once that happens, then they pique their interest and they want to read a little bit more about who you are, right? So in the cover letter, this is your chance to really tell a story about who you are, right? As a journalist or whoever you want to portray yourself as, right? So that's why, in a sense, right, if you wanted to have an anecdote in the beginning, you want to keep it a lot shorter and you want to go straight to the point, right? Because the thing is that for me, when I'm writing my resume and a cover letter, I'm mentally guiding my reader step by step. If my reader reads this, he'll think that, right? Or like my reader sees this, he might think that. So in a sense, right, you're trying to convince your reader to want to talk to you more about yourself, basically, right? So that's why, in a sense, right here at the very bottom, right, it says on the 4th paragraph, I'm now at Scripps College where I've held powerful people accountable through investigative journalism. That sounds really interesting. And I would really love to see Megan talk more about that, right? That sounds so interesting, like powerful people, accountability. Like that's like a very, I think that's like, especially nowadays too, right? That's like a very good, I think like kind of chemistry sort of thing of really just talk about. And even like talking about the cover letter, right? Your cover letter is supposed to show. Like I had a lot of cover letters that had a lot of good content, but it was just basically a resume and sentences in paragraph form. Like your cover letter is supposed to elaborate on your points that you made in your resume in a sense. And again, right, going back to this idea of storytelling, right? How would you introduce yourself to your interviewer, right? So you would say, my name is this, I'm interested in this, right? And then that sort of sense, you're using your cover letter to tell part of your story, and then your cover letter and your resume together, right, will pique, is it pick or peak? Peak or like whet the interest in a sense of your reader to the point where they will want to talk to you. Lian, did you have anything to add or? Sorry, I
I
was
think
talking for a long time about it.
that's okay. I think you got most of it. I also just want to say real quick just about mistakes in cover letters. As with everything you write, proofread it. Have, you proofread it. Have your mom proofread it. Have a friend proofread it, especially if there's a job you really, really want. I didn't do that in the last cover letter that I submitted. And as soon as I submitted it, I looked at it and I saw 2 typos and was just like, oh no. And what had happened was I'd had my mom read it, but she was like half asleep at the time. So it wasn't as helpful. But yeah, so proofread your stuff. And if you, like me or my mother, were tired on that day, just go to bed, sleep on it, come back to it, you'll look at it, it'll be a lot better. Also, I have a template for the cover letters that I write. So and I just kind of save it in my, Google Drive or whatever, and then come back to it and build on it for whatever job it is I'm applying for. And that can help so you're not just starting from scratch every single time, because honestly, that's exhausting. So some of you were asking about formatting your cover letters. So you have your contact information at the top and or your employer's contact information at the top. So some places will tell you, like some websites, if you look at them, will tell you to have the employer as well. That's fine. Like Megan did here, that's perfect. Just so you know it's going to exactly the right person. Then you say, dear so-and-so, or if you're not sure, to whom it may concern is always applicable. To whom it may concern, colon, not a comma. It's just I don't know, it's a weird style thing, but that's how it is. And then you do your elevator pitch like Alan was talking about. You introduce yourself, you say who you are, what exactly the position you're interested in, obviously, because you don't want to that's called burying your lead. If you get to the 3rd paragraph and then you mention what position you're interested in, no good. So start there. And then give 3 examples, I would say, kind of like writing your essay back in 4th grade when you were taught how to write an essay. Give 3 examples that support your point, support your thesis of the position that you're applying for. Then end it with how they can reach you and thank them for their time. That's always very important. And yeah, so just having that template makes things about 1 billion times more easy, because you don't have to go back and start the whole thing all over again, because it's really not necessary. You can just build off the one you have, and it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache.
And then I guess I have some other points as well. Just like going through questions that were submitted, and just like looking over some of the bullet points that we talked about. I was wondering, before we go on, could we get Megan's cover letter back on the screen? Just wanted to have some examples, I guess, of what I wanted to talk about. Yeah, okay, thank you. So then if we look at the 2nd paragraph, right? So on the 3rd sentence, it says, although I was a high school senior and not Woodward or Bernstein, I felt like a veteran investigative journalist. And then when I see the sentence, for me, I think one thing that a lot of people do is that I don't want to say that they're afraid, but I feel like they're underselling themselves in a sense, where the way they write, it sounds almost as if they're trying to have a caveat or some kind of a disclaimer, right? Because this idea is that you're selling yourself and you have to believe in yourself, right? So when you write, your tone, right? I feel like you have to write in a tone that is confident without being arrogant, right? There's a way of just simply saying what you mean. You don't need to have this whole background because they know you were a high school senior, right? And it's oh, actually they don't, not here. But in the case that they did, right? You don't need to act in a way that you have to over-explain yourself, right? Just be clear with what you mean and just say what you mean, because you're competing with everyone else. And I'm not saying that you should lie. I'm not saying that you should say something that's not true. but right, you've done these things and you've worked your way to where you are now. So don't undersell yourself when you're writing, and just say what you mean, right? And going back to what Lian said earlier, right? This idea of an elevator pitch, I think it really helps to have like a topic sentence or something where it's like where you summarize in like 3 bullet points. Like, these are the 3 things that make me a good journalist for this job, right? And then in your examples, right, you're gonna use those examples to illustrate those points, right? And then besides that, you also want to do your research. You want to show that you actually care about wherever you're applying. So if you're applying to a podcast or you're applying to like a newspaper, maybe mention a few stories or a story or two that you read that you really liked. Or maybe even pitch. Sometimes they'll even ask for pitches where you can like even like pitch an idea at the bottom, right? Just to show them, your reader, that you took the extra step to really do your research and you actually read the publication, right? Because sometimes like you sit down with the interviewer, they'll ask you, what's one story you read of us recently? Or like, what's one, or like, for example, when I interviewed for my NPR internship last year, right? One of the questions was, what is one way we can improve our coverage? So if I didn't listen to like whatever show I was at, right, then like I would have no idea how to answer that in that sort of sense, right? Because in that sort of sense, right now, when we're talking about journalism, right, talking about coverage, talking about topics and that sort of things, these are all really important. So that's why that question made a lot of sense. And definitely making that extra effort, and again, right, distinguishing yourself in any way in your cover letter and your resume is a great thing to do. So definitely here, right, would have been actually, if we scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so for example, if she's applying for the Inquirer, right? Like, it would be great if she could maybe just mention a story saying, hey, this is a reporter, whatever his or her name is, right? I really like their coverage, how they cover this story. I really like how they cover that. Or, maybe one story that I think you guys haven't covered yet in Philadelphia is this. And I think this, right? I've done my research in that, or like I looked into it, right? That sort of thing where you're really putting your best foot forward and of showing the reader that you really want to be in this newsroom and you really want to contribute and you can contribute. So that'll be it for cover letters. Just like before we go on, just wanted to illustrate once again. For those of you who are joining us now, if you could ask questions, tweet us at Elaine Kong News, Lian _Parsons, and also ALLPNG, that's me. And if you have any questions throughout, we will be answering these questions at the end with a Q&A session. We've already covered resumes, broadcast reels, and cover letters, and now we'll be talking about interviews. So Elaine, if you could just start us off as talking about your experience of interviewing and how to interview, it's like the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
I mean, interviewing in broadcast obviously is just so much more different than print of what they're going to be talking about. My first okay, so when I was in college, I applied to 150 stations is basically what I did. I was just like, I'm going to send my reel out to anybody and everybody. So that's what I did. I sent it out to 150 stations. I probably applied to like positions that were already closed, but they didn't post it yet because I just wanted a chance so bad. And I know how hard it is to get into the broadcast world. So I sent it out everywhere. And it was, I was so lucky that I applied one day. It was June 2016. I applied one day. It was literally a week after I graduated. And I applied to all these stations in one day. And the next day, I get this phone call, and it's from Texas. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. Because I'm from California, if you guys didn't know. I'm from California. So I was like, I've never gotten a phone call ever from Texas. So I was like, oh, maybe it's, like somebody trying to sell me something. But I answered and I was like, hello. And then they're like, this is, Scott Lawrence. He's my news director. And, we saw your reel. We're really interested. And he just was so great because he led the conversation. He knew I was straight out of college. He already saw my reel. So in the broadcast world, especially, they already know what you look like. They already know what you're about. They already know what your skill level is. So they're not really going to ask you about that. They're really just going to ask you about you. And they're going to want to see if you can work or you can fit in their newsroom is really what the conversation's about. He was asking about, where I'm from. Scott's also from he's from like a Los Angeles area. So like we were talking about that. And it was just such a casual conversation. He was like, this is a great work environment. And he told me about it because, you know, I'm, you know, from California, never been to Texas. Like, he's going to want to also, you know, lure me in and wanting me to go there if I'm a good candidate. So, I mean, that was just, it was really, really easy, that first initial phone call. And right then and there, I was just like, I didn't even go visit for the station. I was just like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to move. So which probably wasn't a smart thing, but I was just like so eager to want to start that I was like, okay, great. And then we had like 4 more phone calls within the next like week and a half. And then I moved in July. I moved on July 4th of 2016 with my dad. We drove cross country to Texas. It took us 23 hours, it took 3 days to get here. And so then I just started, and boy, I wish I would have visited. Not that I would have changed my mind, but then I would have had a way better experience. So for your first, you know, interview, it's going to be an initial phone call. You know, mine lasted about an hour, and that's usually how long all of my interviews have lasted. And, you know, if it's a first job and you're applying for a reporter or MMJ position, most likely they're not going to fly you out. They're not going to have that budget, especially if they're a starter market, like, you know, Beaumont's market 142. They're only going to fly, you know, anchors out if they, you know, are really interested in them. They're not going to fly reporters out. You're going to have to fly yourself out. So definitely budget for that if you're going to, you know, apply for somewhere, you know, not in your state. So interviewing for that portion is really easy, and it's really just getting to know you, and it's more about your personality. You can fit inside their newsroom, if you are going to be, you know, an asset to them, if, you know, they really kind of judge if you're going to be a hard person to work with or if you're really willing to learn is my experience with it. And just being you really just have to be yourself and be talkative, but really listen as well. Especially in the broadcast world, after that first initial phone call, it's either a first initial phone call or that email that you first get saying, hey, you know, what time can you talk to us? So if you get an email first, you need to go to that station, you need to go to their website, and you need to be watching their newscasts, especially in any position that you are applying for in a newsroom. Because as a reporter, you want to see what your coworkers are going to look like. If you want to be at that station, if you think that you can fit that, you know, certain mold, and then you want to see how the producers produce. You want to see how they, you know, what graphics they use, you know, how they run the show, what the flow of the show is, you know, what are lead stories that you're going to have to try and pitch if you're at that certain station. So all of that's really important. When I was applying back in January, you know, of all the stations I was applying to, I went to their website first, watched their live broadcast of the last one they just did, and kind of, could I see myself here? Is this something that I would think that, you know, would be a good fit for me? Would I like these people? Do I like their on-air presence? Do I like their content? Do I like their stories? You know, all of that is really important, because it's not just them interviewing you. You are also, you know, you're an asset as well. You need to think for yourself that way, you know, just like Alan was saying in your cover letters, but think of that in person as well, especially in broadcast. You need to know that you want to be there, because if you're going to be a hire where you're only going to be there for maybe 6 months and you say, you know, I don't like this vibe, I don't really want to be here anymore, that's kind of a really big black mark, especially in your first market. You know, not just because you're homesick, but because you don't think you fit here, or you don't like the, you know, the people that work there. That's a no-no. A lot of people, you know, I was talking to my news director just last week when he was interviewing people for my position, because I'm leaving, and he was saying, you know, people that are at one station for 6 months or 3 months and they're already applying, like, those are not people that I look for, because you don't know if they're going to be a flight risk, right? Basically. So, yeah, that's kind of the advice I have. Just be yourself, and if it's meant to be, it'll work out.
Oh, next, Lian, did you want to talk about your experiences in interviews and anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. So just, I know that interviews can kind of be a scary process. It is hard going in there, you know, not knowing the person individually and really wanting to make a good first impression. But you want to remember that, like, they're rooting for you. They want you to be the person that they're going to hire. They don't want to go through 50 other interviews. They're going to be like, no, I want this one to be the last one. And so knowing that, like, they're not there to trip you up, they're not there to intimidate you or be scary. And if they are, then maybe you don't really want to be there. You might get some harder questions, but that's where preparation comes in. being as prepared as possible has always made me feel better. We've talked about this a lot, sort of as we've gone through cover letters and all of that. But like doing your research about the place you're going to be working is so important. It will make you feel so much more prepared and like you know what you're talking about. And even if you don't know everything, that's okay. They're not expecting you to. It's just going through the effort to show that you've tried. Also, Alan mentioned having your resume lead to your cover letter, and then your cover letter should lead to your interview, where they've learned these little pieces about you enough that they want to actually talk to you in person, either over the phone or come into their office, and really get to know you, like Elena was saying. And so it's never a bad idea to bring a copy of your resume and cover letter. If some people might ask for it, or you can just review it as you're waiting, or look at it before you leave the house, just so you know the main points that you want to talk about. And that's, again, going back to the preparation aspect of it. That's really important to make you feel confident. Excuse me. Also, some people, I think, in the survey were asking about like what to wear and things like that. The way that I do this is I say, what would I wear to a nice restaurant or nice dinner out with my family? And then that's a pretty good benchmark, for so yeah, that's kind of if you're not sure, that's just a guideline. Has anyone had any really bad interview experiences that they want to talk about?
I have one.
Go for it.
So, wait, Elaine, do you have one too? We take turns. No.
Story time.
Okay.
You go first, Alan.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, yeah. So, a bad interview experience. I think I've only had one bad experience where it was partially the interviewer's fault and my fault. So for some reason that day, I was interviewing for an internship at a place not to be named, right? And I think because this idea that I think Lian talked about earlier, and I think Elaine touched on too, is the idea that an interview was kind of like a conversation, right? Because they want to know if they can work with you, right? You're gonna be seeing these people 5 days a week, however, like 40 hours, 50 hours a week, right? So you want to know that when you guys are in the same room, you guys can function, you guys can vibe, and then this idea that you're really just having a chat, right? You're trying to talk to them about why you think you should be working with them, and they're trying to get to know you, right? So in that sort of sense, that one day, I was taking this like too far. So I remember like at some point in an interview, I consciously realized I was doing this, where I was doing the interview, right? I was like kind of like this. I was like, yeah, XYZ, yada yada yada, and like my head was back. I was leaning back in my chair, and I was kind of like spinning around, and that's definitely a no-no, because you want to. Body language is really important, right? So you want to have eye contact, right? You don't want to stare too hard, but you want to like nod, you know what I mean? Like having like the audible noises, that sort of thing. And then the bad thing for me too that I noticed from the interviewer was that I could tell she had lost interest because her eyes were wandering all around the room. Like she looked actively bored. So that is also a bad sign. Your interviewers usually won't do that because that's really just rude. But if that happens, just go with it. If there's an interview where you feel like you're not off on the right foot, or if you're feeling like interviewer, like you don't want to assume anything, right? So you want to put your best foot forward again, right? So you always want to stay professional, no matter how your interviewer is acting, because again, right, they're the one interviewing you. You don't have a job, so you have to act as professional as possible. So that's my story. Another story that I have, I guess in a sense, just like one more, was for an internship I got last year, and that interview was bad because the call dropped like 5 times because my interviewer was on vacation in London, so he was calling me on Skype, and the number there wasn't a number, so I couldn't call him back. But in those situations, don't panic, just keep calm and just like do your thing, You know what I mean? Just like control what you can control, right? Whether it's like your resume, cover letter, or your interview, think about what you yourself can do in whatever in that moment, and don't worry about anything else, and just do what you can. Yeah, so that's what I got. Yeah.
To bounce off Alan's second story, this one time I had this interview with a new station. It was actually, I think, back in November, and I think it was actually back in November, and I was sitting in the car with our sports reporter because we were going to cover the state football championships in Texas, and that's like a really big deal. So they sent me as well. And we had Beaumont is like near Houston, right? And we had to go all the way to Dallas. So we were traveling like the fastest route. So we were like weaving in and out of like this, it was like a drop call zone area. And it was just so, it dropped, like Alan was saying, like 5 times. But for me, it was like, you kind of, for me, I had to make it into like a light situation, you know? I was like, oh man, dang AT&T, you know, oh dang Verizon, like, oh, it's always just cutting out. Like, you got to just make fun of, you know, the situation. And usually they understand, especially if you explain to them the situation of, you know, where you are, or if it's, you know, on their end that, you know, they should make a light situation out of it. But yeah, so I think that was a great interview though. And it was just so funny that it was just kept dropping the calls. But my bad story would be, I had this email from a news director that shall not be named, obviously. And he was like, hey, Elaine, you know, we saw your reel. We were really interested in you. Let us know when you can talk. And I emailed him back and I was like, hey, you know, John, for example, not his actual name. You know, I'm free tomorrow. You know, I work the night shift, so I'm, you know, free anytime before 1:30. He was like, great. So he called me at like 9 o'clock in the morning. I was like a little bit groggy, but I was just like, okay, like, let's do it, you know. And I don't get off work till like 11 o'clock at night. So it was just like, oh man. So, you know, it was really early in the morning for me. And I was just like, okay, we're going to do this. And he starts a phone call he's like, hey, Elaine, you know, great talking with you. This is how he starts it. He's literally like, great talking to you. Do you have any questions for me? And I was like, what are you like? What do you mean? Do I have any questions for you? Like, we haven't even had the interview yet. Like, we just had one exchange of an email. What do you mean? Do I have any questions for you? And I was just like, and this was one of those times where I didn't do my homework. And I was just like, oh yeah, the city is really cool. It was really awkward on my part. But then he also was like, okay, great. Do you have anything else? And I was just like, what? I was so confused. And then I was just like, no, is there any, you know, did you think I could improve any ways? And he was just like, nope, you're great. And I was like, oh. So I was like, so do we move on? Like, I'm so confused. And he was just like, no, we're actually moving along with a different candidate, but can you sign this for me? And it was a diversity thing. Like, it was like a letter basically saying he interviewed somebody that wasn't, you know, white. So that was incredibly interesting. And I was just like, sure. And I was just like, and then I hung up the phone call and I was like, great talking to you. Bye. And it was just like, no, like it wasn't because I was groggy. You know, me not, you know, interviewing, you know, looking up the station beforehand probably didn't help, but it was very clear afterwards that he was in it to interview me because I was Asian. So that's my bad story.
Dang, yo, no, that's terrible. Sorry you went through that.
I mean, whatever you go through makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, actually, I have a similar story, but not that where like I've had interviews where they didn't ask me any questions and they only asked me to ask them questions. So that is definitely something that has happened and may happen for internships, but I don't think about jobs. Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you guys want to address about interviews, or is there anything like any little tips? Lian, is there anything you want to like add or?
Yeah. So another way to think about an interview is like a networking event. So when you go to a networking event, you're meeting people, you're always there for a purpose, you know, whether it's to get to know more people in your industry, to make more connections, to find more people in your area, whatever it is. So you usually have an idea in your mind of what the purpose of going to this event is. Same for an interview. You're going there to get the job, hopefully, and also to find out more about the company that you might be working for. And so presenting yourself in the way that you would present yourself in a networking setting has kind of actually been helpful for me, or vice versa. And so, again, same thing with the elevator pitch, letting people know who you are, what your strengths are, what you're interested in. And sort of in the counterpoint of strengths, a pretty common question is, what do you think your greatest weakness is, or what are some of your weaknesses, or something you think you could improve on? I would caution against doing that thing where you try to make a good thing sound bad. So like, oh, I'm just too much of a perfectionist. I have to make things perfect. Like, I think for me, that's pretty transparent. I think you can kind of see through what someone's trying to do there. So I would say just be honest, I mean, for example, for me, I have a pretty big problem with procrastination, which I feel is pretty common. So if I'm just straight up and I'm like, yeah, I'm not great when it comes to procrastinating, but I always make the effort to stick to my deadlines. Sometimes I do finish things last minute, but I've been working on doing that a lot less, or, however it is you want to couch that. But trying to make a good thing sound bad is kind of faked, to be honest. And then also I wanted to mention that, what was I going to mention? I don't remember. I forgot. I'll come back to it. But Alan, did you wanna tack on anything else?
Oh yeah, sure. So just like hitting off of that, I think sometimes when we looked at interview questions, right? So the thing is that a lot of times we talked about how they ask us to ask questions, right? So when that comes to the question is, what questions should we ask, right? So usually, like for me, common questions that I like start with general questions, right? Like interview, where you kind of work your way into more specifically like a inverted pyramid, right? Sort of thing where you can ask about, what was your experience like at XYZ, or how long have you been here, or what's the team like? How big is the team? Or just like how is an average day gonna go, right? Just little things like that, where you're really just like figuring out, not just doing it because you want to act like you're interested, but really doing it for your own benefit, right? Where you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm moving to this company, right? It's like it's a big thing, right? You're moving sometimes to a different city for a job, right? Like, what is it like there? What kind of territory am I getting into, right? What kind of terrain am I going to be working in? Or, for example, asking. I even talked to someone recently who said one question to ask would be, what gets you fired, or like who does well here, like what kind of things. Because in a sense, right, even though all these journalism companies, they all produce news, but I think that every single company has this culture, right? They each have a culture and they each have a way of getting things done. And I think that's really important when you're trying to figure out how you're, in a vague way, right? In a very kind of like outside looking in way, right? As best your ability, right? Trying to figure out who you're working with and like what kind of people you'd be working with as well. So those are some things that to think about moving forward. And I also like to talk about how sometimes interviewers will deliberately ask you ridiculous questions to see like how fast you think on your feet. You know what I mean? So like for my job interview, they would ask me questions like, what is media and social media going to look like in like 15 years? Or they'll ask me like, if you were like the head of this like company, like what direction or what vision would you have for us? It's like very like broad questions that no one can really answer. And these are just things that test you, and don't panic because they're doing this to everyone and everyone else is probably panicking, like you. So you're all in the same boat, and it doesn't hurt to clarify the question. It also doesn't hurt to take your time to think, and don't rush into the question in a sense where, because I think they also understand that this is not an easy question to answer, right? So that's why definitely don't panic and just stay calm and just think it through and take your time. And besides that, it's also good to send follow-up emails. So after your interview, send an email to whoever saying, dear this or to whom this, right? Thank you for your time. Or usually, like if you don't have an email already, maybe get their business card, right? Or get some kind of contact info where you can reach them, right, afterwards. So you can just let them know and just kind of remind them that, hey, I'm still interested in this position. Here's what makes me XYZ, and then thank you very much. Looking forward to hearing back from you. That's it, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Alan.
No, go. No,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Sending the follow-up is really important. It's kind of like sending a thank you letter after someone comes to your party. No one does it anymore. It's really important. It's manners, obviously, and then also, yeah, like Alan said, just shows that you're really interested. Another way that to show that you're personally interested in the company or even the person interviewing is to turn some of the questions back on them. So say, what do you value most about this company, or what have you learned in your time working here? And they can kind of, think about it and say, oh yeah, like this applies to me, and maybe this will apply to you, or just showing that you have a personal interest rather than what can I get out of this, because obviously you also want to show what you can offer to a place, and yeah, I also just wanted to tack on those points.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
A super quick side note for broadcast people. I forgot to mention earlier, if you are going in for an in-person interview, you need to dress like you are going on air that day. So you need to have a full face of makeup, which probably sounds weird, but you really do. You need it like you have like whatever you have to wear to be on air to be 100% ready. That's what you need to be on your face. And then you also need to have a dress on and high heels. That's what I've been told from all my other mentors. And when I go for job interviews, that's what I've done as well. And it seems to work for me. They want to be able to see you basically working there right then and there when you are interviewing them with them in person.
Cool. Thank you, Elaine. And so now we will be going to our Q&A session. So those of you who tweeted at us, we have, it looks like 2 or 3 questions as of now. So first question that I think we'll tackle is from Gwendolyn.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, when applying for jobs in cities or regions you've never reported from, how do you use your cover letter to convince the hiring editor you're worth an interview? So I had some thoughts on it, so I guess I'll just share a little bit, and then whoever else wants to chime in, feel free. But I think a lot of times too, when we're talking about people being hired, I think in my experience, and also just like looking at people in my company that I've worked with, a lot of it is more about having just the skills to do the job, because a lot of training happens on the job. Whether it's, for example, I'm radio, so whether it was learning how to cut audio or learning just like these kind of basic things, but in a sense, right, as long as you have this basic skills to do reporting, I think you should be fine. And also, it also helps to do your research. So when I apply for reporting jobs in different states, I'll be sure to look at the publication, right? Doing research on publication is double whammy, right? 2 birds, 1 stone. Where, for example, if I'm applying to like Chicago or like LA, I'll read articles and I'll read publications that are in that area, right? So I'll have a sense of what is being covered there and what is not being covered there. And that sort of sense, right? Again, it shows that kind of interest, that extra step where you're really showing that you want to be there, you're interested, and you want to work there. I also don't think it hurts to talk about in terms of just like, again, right, going back to this idea, almost in a sense of what Lian talked about, of if you have no journalism experience, like how can you like show that in a cover letter, right? So the same thing here, where you're really just using what you have, your existing skills and your existing experiences to say, I can do this, here's how I can do it, and here's like what I've done that proves the points that I'm making, right? So just like being confident and just like don't worry about not having reported there before, because I think nowadays journalism, everyone's always moving everywhere. It's very common nowadays. It's not like in the old days, perhaps, but nowadays it's very common for journalists to move all over the country, like Elaine, California, Texas, and all that. So that's why I wouldn't stress too much about that. Yeah. If you guys have anything to chime in on?
For broadcast side of it, when you do, basically just be yourself. They're there's going to be people that are senior people that are in that newsroom that are going to be able to help you with sources, help you with story ideas and all of that. Just go in with a good attitude is what I say. Like, especially during the interview, as long as you can prove that and that you're willing to learn, you have, something that they can work with, especially if they're looking to hire somebody right out of college, they're going to know you don't know everything, like you're fresh out of college. Like what you learn in class is just, obviously there's theories and, all the stuff you learn in class, but it is 100% a new ball game when you are in the real world working as a journalist that puts out information for, whatever area that you cover. So just be you. And that's the best advice. Just be you. And they're going to know that if you can do the job or not.
Yeah. So I don't really have anything else to add. You two covered it pretty well. Our next question comes from Benjamin, and he asks, have your managing editors ever complained about having too many cover letters that are too long? Just as a rule of thumb, I tend to keep both my resume and my cover letter to one page. Again, people don't have a lot of time, so it's good to just keep it short, sweet, straight to the point. And I talked a little bit before about having that essay format of like your intro, your thesis statement, 3 supporting examples from your past work experience, or if you don't have a lot of work experience, go with your innate qualities that we've kind of been discussing, and then you're closing with your contact info and thank them for their time. So just keeping it short and sweet to the point will really just be a lot easier for them to read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Lian. Wait, Elaine, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I could add like the broadcast side of it for your reel.
Yeah.
No, I mean that question's obviously geared towards you guys anyways. Yeah. But for your reel, like when I talk to news directors, my news director especially, since he wants me to be a part of that hiring process for my position now, he's told me, and so many others have told me, with your reel, they're looking at maybe 15-20 seconds max of your montage, which is the first part of your reel, and then they skip to the packages and see if you use nat sound, if you have basically a storytelling skills. So don't make things too long. Just like Lian was saying for your cover letter, same thing for broadcast. You do not want to make your montage too long. You don't want to have it to where you have a 30-second stand-up and you put that whole 30 seconds in there. That's boring. Do clip that into like a 6-second clip and then put that on your reel, and then do that with all of the other clips for your montage as well. And that's going to be quicker and easier for people to look at. They're going to get a better sense of who you are compared to just one long clip that's kind of drawn out a little bit. Back to you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Our next question is from, I'm sorry if I do not pronounce your name correctly, Anuz, okay? And he tweeted, hey guys, how much time do you spend in cover letters? So I think how I interpret his question, and you can correct us if you're wrong, live tweet, but how I interpreted this question is, how long does it take for us to write a cover letter, right? So then for me, right now, I have 2 cover letter templates, quote unquote, that I kind of use. So for example, I had one template for strictly radio and audio, so like podcasts and that sort of thing. And then I had one for digital, so like more print, right? So this like using my radio experience, but focusing more on the reporting side or the news, like the basic news, like skill side, right? And so in that sense, it doesn't take me that long because I already have a good idea of who I am, I guess, in a sense, because that's what it is. When you're doing resumes and cover letters, you really have to figure out, like, really kind of be introspective, right? Figure out who am I and how do I want to show, like, how do I want to like present myself, right, to these readers. So when I think about that, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Like if I have to listen to a podcast, because if I'm planning to a podcast, I want to know the show, right? Or if I'm doing research, then I'll like take a little more time to read or listen to an episode and then perhaps some critiques or some like feedback, right? So maybe that will take 30 minutes. But in terms of the actual writing, it shouldn't take any more than 10 to 15 minutes for me, because I already usually have a foundation to work off of, right? I'm just like customizing it, as Lian mentioned before, right? Customizing it toward that particular job. That's what I had. So yeah.
And then there is a question that was sent to me by Sylvia Zhao, and she says that she's really excited for our webinar. Thank you. And she says, I do have my YouTube channel where I upload all of my video work, but I don't have a reel made. The reason is that I only create video packages. I don't have any real on-camera experience. Do you think in my case a reel is necessary? If so, how should I put it together? So Sylvia, if you looked at the beginning part of when I first started talking about how to build a broadcast reel, minute 30 for your montage max, and then 3 stories that you have, put that on there, 2 hard news packages, and then a more of a feature package. But if you already have a whole bunch of packages on your YouTube, that's great. Definitely build upon that. But if you want an on-air position, you definitely, absolutely, it's 100% necessary to have your face on camera, because if not, they're not going to know what you look like, and they're not going to probably move forward with you if they don't know what you look like and you're applying for an MMJ or a reporter position. If you were trying to apply for a photojournalist position where you just want to be behind the scenes, but you still want to do the interviews and you want to be, operating the camera and all of that, but you just don't want to be in front of the camera, that might be a little different. But if it is an on-air position you want to apply for, you definitely need to have that montage in there.
Cool. Thank you, Elaine. Next, Lian will be taking on this question, which is, should resumes and cover letters be flashy and have colors, or do managers usually like more boring, cut and dry resumes?
Yeah. So with this, I think you should kind of use your judgment, to be honest. So for my resume, which we looked at a little bit earlier, I do have colors on it. My theme is sort of a light blue, but I kept everything else gray and black, and the background itself is white. So the most neutral colors, and then the small little bits of blue. And then the other resume that we looked at had red in it, and sort of helped to draw the eye to the most important parts. But the format was still clean. The font was still clean. Oh my God, if you guys don't know this already, don't use Comic Sans. Thank you so much. We all know that one person, I swear. But if they just want a cut and dried resume, if it's something, maybe a place that's a bit more, has a more conservative work culture, or something a bit more, polished and professional kind of deal, and I just want to do the straight up Word document, then that's just in black and white. And my favorite font, if anyone is wondering, is Garamond. And
that's
so
my favorite font.
Hey. So I also try, when I'm using that resume, to match it to the same font as my cover letter. It just makes me feel better, and it adds the same continuity. If you have a header for your brand or whatever, say you're in marketing or something like that, you can add that into both of them just so they look consistent. And then so it's kind of just use your best judgment and go from there. Just do what feels good. But just I would caution not going over the top, keeping it neutral, keeping it relatively professional, so that it can be as flexible as possible as to where you're sending it.
Thank you, Lian. And just to tack onto that one more, like for example, because I learned how to do my resume from my friends in business school. So my resume is very basic. It's like black and white, bang, 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 bang. So for me, that's how I like to think, and how I try, again, right, going back to this idea of like having my own style in a sense, right, where I'm thinking about a resume, cover letter, my process, right, I'm thinking about it in terms of guiding the reader's mind. So that's why I have mine. It's like a straight down one column, and everything I have on there is deliberate to really just like reel the reader in. That's what it says, right? So when we're talking about having this ability just to make sure that you have color on there, make sure you know what you're doing. Like make sure it's there for a purpose, and otherwise, like, you can go ahead and just be as creative as you want, because I think managers sometimes like that kind of difference. But at the end of the day, right, it's less about looking nice, but more about how you want to present yourself to the reader. And up next, we have another question about cover letters. Actually, I lied. It's about the website. Yeah, the website. So for the website, Anuz is asking, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it right because I haven't been corrected yet, but how important is it to have a website of your own? I usually direct it to my LinkedIn page. So any takers? Website?
If you have something, Alan, you go first.
Oh, okay. I'll go. Okay. So for me, I just think that on a LinkedIn page, it's well, because thing is that on a LinkedIn page, right, you can link work pieces, right? So like you can have like position underneath, it's like media samples, right? But sometimes like I think it's easier and the format looks better if you have your own website and it's a little personalized. And I just think this is nice to have a portfolio site where you can put on your card or anything, or like a business card or something like that. So for example, on my site, I have a list of audio production samples, right? Because like they don't all fit under one company per se, right? But I just want to have like a quick section where someone's scrolling down, they can see, boom, okay, I've done production for this. I'm doing tape syncs, it's like a radio thing, or I've done like field production, right? So I think it really helps also again, right? This idea of crafting your own brand and like who you are, whether it's like having a website where you can like illustrate your coding skills, or like your artsiness, right? All these sort of things. Right? I feel like having a website really just gives you more control, right, over how you present yourself. So that's my answer. And I use a Squarespace, just a basic template. I don't know any coding. I thought about it, but it's not my thing right now. But just having something up there, I think is really good. If anyone else was trying to, yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think that a website can definitely be helpful if you are more visual. So if you're in design, if you are in broadcast, if you're a photographer, definitely having a place where you have all your stuff, or your best work, let's hope, showcased, like Alan was saying, gives you a lot of control. An alternate, especially for print journalists, where there's not a whole lot of visual elements that you can share, is to make a professional Facebook page. I have a lot of friends who have made their own, and they post the articles that they've written, and people can follow along and ask them questions. Of course, you have your Twitter. Some people choose to separate their professional Twitter from their personal Twitter. I don't, just because I'm a little bit lazy, so I choose to have the same thing. But yeah, definitely if you're more visual, it's a good place to consolidate everything.
For the broadcast side of things, I think it's great if you have the time and you're willing to do a website and you can make it great. Oh, absolutely do it. I mean, you have, in top 10 markets, you have people that are reporters, anchors that have their own website. But for me, because I'm a little lazy, I just did, and I don't have the time to do it as of right now, but I just do it on YouTube. I mean, I put almost like once a week, maybe I would say, I put up 1 or 2 of my stories that I do throughout the week at work online on YouTube. And, my reel's already on there. And then I have, all these other stories that, people can also link to, because especially as for broadcast people, once you're already get in the industry and you're applying for a second job, they're going to ask you for your last 3 or 5 stories when you go to another interview. At least that's my experience with it. They'll be like, okay, show me your last 3 to 5 stories that you did this week, after they see your reel, if they're interested in you. So you can also use that as well. YouTube is a great tool.
Cool. So yeah, we're just gonna wrap up. Thank you so much to everyone who came, everyone who submitted their cover letters and resumes. They were super helpful. And to everyone who is tweeting, big shout out to Benjamin Pooh, who has been live tweeting this entire thing.
Yes.
So if you missed that, we're all going to be retweeting the thread, so you can go back and look at our highlights. And then also, so please hit us up on Twitter. Alan, once again, if you want to show the thing.
Oh yeah, the thing.
Yeah.
The thing. Yeah, the thing.
If you ever have...
Oh, sorry, go Lian.
Sorry, yeah, if you guys have any questions, if you want... eyes on your resumes, cover letters, reels, reach out to us. We've run out of time to do resources because we were sort of thinking of doing a short little list of stuff that might be helpful to people building cover letters and resumes and prepping for interviews, but I did a thread a while back on my Twitter. I can pin it back up to my page or start a whole new one because I found new ones. So yeah, thanks everyone. Go ahead, Elaine.
The other thing, I mean, Lian, you're actually the one that mentioned this. When we were all setting up this webinar, we were all talking about like, oh, we got to tweet, we got to do this, we got to do that. And, you know, it's a requirement, at least for my position, to tweet. Like, they're like, you got to do 3 to 5 tweets a day. So, like, you know, as AAJA members, you know, as fellow, you know, coworkers, friends, yada, yada, like, we all, like, try to tweet at each other now. And, like, you know, building those relationships really help that, you know, that tweeting life and the Facebook life and all of that. So definitely make friends with other people within the broadcast world to kind of, you know, build yourself up on the social platforms.
Yeah, for sure. Build your brand, say hi, be friendly. We're all great people.
Nobody's gonna be mean to you. You know?
No. And if you're out there looking for a job like me, good luck. It's gonna be fine. I promise. We're all gonna get there. And have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us. Bye, guys.
Bye. Yeah.